What if I told you there was once a community so wealthy, so powerful, so successful that it earned the name Black Wall Street? A place where black families owned businesses, banks, theaters, and land in an era of deep segregation and racial oppression. But in 1921, everything changed. In just 24 hours, one of the most prosperous black neighborhoods in American history was reduced to ashes. This is the story you were never taught. This is the untold story of Black Wall Street.
The story of the deadliest race massacre in American history begins with two individuals, Dick Rowland and Sarah Page.
To understand the greatness of Black Wall Street, we begin with Greenwood, a district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. After the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, many African Americans fled the South seeking safety, dignity, and opportunity. Oklahoma, still largely undeveloped Indian territory, promised new beginnings. In 1906, a wealthy black entrepreneur named O.W. Gurley purchased 40 acres of land on the north side of Tulsa. He sold plots only to other African Americans. Soon, other black leaders followed, people like John and Lula Williams, J.B. Stratford, and Simon Barry, who invested in property, opened businesses, and shaped Greenwood into a thriving neighborhood.
Months following the Civil War and the start of Reconstruction offered African Americans in the South hope for equality. It also offered the possibility of owning land.
By the 1920s, Greenwood had grown into a vibrant, self-contained black community with a population of over 10,000 black residents. There were more than 300 black-owned businesses, including two newspapers, the Tulsa Star and the Oklahoma Sun, a public library, grocery stores and butcher shops, movie theaters, including the Dreamland Theater, barbershops and salons, doctors, dentists, and lawyers, a hospital and a nursing school, a school system that rivaled many white schools in the state. It became so prosperous, it was dubbed Negro Wall Street by Booker T. Washington, later known more famously as Black Wall Street. Greenwood stood as a shining example of black excellence. It was a community that embraced culture, intellect, entrepreneurship, and unity. Families lived in brick homes with fine furnishings. Children wore uniforms to school. There was a sense of pride and protection within the community, and it became a symbol of what was possible for black Americans in the face of segregation. Many black families had escaped the Deep South, where lynchings and violence were common. For them, Greenwood was a safe haven, a land of hope. This hope fueled the engine of economic growth. It wasn't unusual to see luxury cars in Greenwood or young people aspiring to be doctors, teachers, and entrepreneurs. Every child knew their future could be bright because the community they lived in had already achieved what many said was impossible. In Greenwood, black residents created an economy that worked for them, since segregation laws prevented them from shopping in white establishments. Money circulated within the community, some say as many as 19 times before leaving. Wealthy black entrepreneurs like J.B. Stratford built the 54-room Stratford Hotel, one of the finest black-owned hotels in the country. Simon Barry operated a bus line and owned a private charter plane service. John and Lula Williams ran a successful chain of movie theaters and owned multiple rental properties. Education was deeply valued. Booker T. Washington High School produced some of the state's top graduates. Churches provided not just spiritual guidance, but civic leadership and charity. Organizations such as the NAACP and mutual aid societies helped coordinate community uplift. Greenwood residents didn't wait for access, they built it. They didn't demand acceptance. They created their own standards of excellence. They built clubs, social circles, Masonic lodges, and women's groups. There were medical professionals who treated both the rich and poor. The community had everything: newspapers to stay informed, barbers to stay groomed, jazz clubs to relax, and restaurants to celebrate. This was not charity or coincidence. It was a deliberate act of building generational wealth, power, and pride. In a society designed to exclude them, Greenwood residents proved they didn't need inclusion to succeed. But in 1921, everything changed, all because of a single elevator ride. On May 30th, 1921, a 19-year-old black shoeshiner named Dick Rowland entered the Drexel building to use the segregated elevator on his way to a restroom located on the top floor. Inside was Sarah Page, a 17-year-old white elevator operator. What happened inside the elevator is still unclear. Some believe Rowland may have stumbled and accidentally touched Page. Others believe nothing happened at all. She screamed, but when questioned later, Sarah Page declined to press charges. But the damage was already done. The next day, the Tulsa Tribune published an inflammatory article titled, "Nab Negro for Attacking Girl in Elevator." The article included the ominous suggestion that Rowland could be lynched. By evening, a white mob had gathered outside the Tulsa County Courthouse, where Rowland was being held. Fearing a lynching, about 75 black men, many of them World War I veterans, went to the courthouse to offer protection. They were turned away. Later, they returned, this time armed. Tensions flared. A white man tried to disarm a black veteran, and a shot rang out. The crowd erupted into violence. White society's deep fear of black autonomy and strength had found its excuse. Greenwood, a symbol of black excellence, became a target. In the early hours of June 1st, 1921, white mobs, some deputized and armed by local law enforcement, swept into Greenwood with guns, torches, and a mission to destroy. Looting began immediately. Black families were forced from their homes at gunpoint. Businesses were ransacked. Fires were set block by block. Reports describe white rioters breaking into safes, setting fire to churches, and shooting anyone in their path. Shockingly, private airplanes, used for reconnaissance, and some allegedly dropping firebombs, flew overhead. Survivors recalled hearing the buzz of aircraft and seeing homes burst into flames from above. It became one of the first aerial assaults on American civilians in U.S. history. Police did not stop the mob. In some cases, they joined them. Firefighters were prevented from entering Greenwood to douse the flames. By dawn, Greenwood, a once vibrant community, was a smoldering ruin. In less than 24 hours, 35 blocks of Black Wall Street were destroyed. More than 1,200 homes were burned to the ground. At least 300 black residents were killed. Some historians believe the number could be much higher. More than 10,000 people were left homeless. Entire families vanished. Bodies were thrown into unmarked mass graves or the Arkansas River. Churches, schools, and businesses were reduced to ash. The National Guard arrived not to protect the community, but to round up survivors. Black residents were marched at gunpoint to detention centers. Many remained in prison for days. They were only released if white employers vouched for them. Greenwood had been wiped off the map, and with it, the economic heart of Black Tulsa. The psychological scars ran deep. Survivors spoke of running barefoot through flames, of children being torn from their mothers, of bullets flying through walls where babies were sleeping. The destruction wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, it was generational, and it was intentional. After the massacre, silence. No white person was ever arrested or charged for the violence. Insurance companies refused to pay claims, citing riot exemptions and policies. Survivors, already destitute, received no restitution from the city or state. The city of Tulsa passed new zoning ordinances that made it almost impossible for black residents to rebuild. Their property was effectively stolen. The white press either ignored the massacre or blamed the black community. Official death counts were minimized. Documents were lost, altered, or destroyed. For decades, the massacre was erased from textbooks. Schools didn't teach it. Government officials didn't speak of it. Survivors were told to move on, to rebuild quietly, without complaint. But trauma doesn't disappear. It lingers. It changes the course of families and futures. Despite the trauma, despite the destruction, Greenwood's residents, those who survived, did not give up. With little outside help, they began the painful process of rebuilding. Churches held services among the ashes. Teachers resumed classes in tents. Some shops reopened in makeshift buildings. By the end of the 1920s, portions of Greenwood were alive again. But the wealth, the infrastructure, and the generational progress had been lost. The survivors, once full of hope, bore scars both visible and invisible. Some moved away. Others stayed and fought. Their descendants carry that burden today. The massacre wasn't just an attack on people. It was an attack on the very idea of Black prosperity. And yet they rebuilt. They held on. They told the stories, even when no one wanted to hear them. Today, after a century of silence, the story of Black Wall Street is being told. In 1996, the state of Oklahoma formed the Tulsa Race Riot Commission, later renamed the Tulsa Race Massacre Commission. In 2001, the commission issued a report detailing the massacre and recommending reparations. In 2021, the 100th anniversary brought renewed attention. 3 living survivors, all over 100 years old, testified before Congress. President Biden visited Tulsa and publicly acknowledged the massacre. Organizations like the Greenwood Rising History Center and Justice for Greenwood are working to educate, preserve, and advocate for reparations and recognition. The massacre is now recognized as one of the worst acts of racial violence in American history. But for many, that recognition is not enough. True justice means reparations, not only monetary, but also historical. It means rewriting the American story to include this chapter. It means honoring the legacy of Greenwood not with silence, but with truth. The story of Black Wall Street must not only be remembered, it must be taught. Black Wall Street wasn't just a place. It was a movement, a miracle, a warning, a promise. It stood as proof that Black Americans, when left to thrive, could create something extraordinary despite systemic obstacles. It was burned, but it was never broken. And now, its story will never be forgotten. Let it be a lesson. Let it be a light. Let it be a vow that what happened in Tulsa can never, ever happen again.